Hey there everybody, Blind Rob here, and welcome back to Starting Out Solitary. This is week 217, and we're talking about archetypes. Also, starting today and moving forward, at least for a little while, I will be stepping in as a substitute for your usual I cannot say that word to save my life, I swear, Wednesday host, Corvus. Apparently he's got something both interesting and important going on in his life that he needs to focus on way more, and because of that is currently unable to do videos for Starting Out Solitary. So I am going to be filling in for him for the time being. And also, if you happen to be watching this video at some point, Corvus, I apologize for not saying your name, and also apologize in advance if I get the little part I do say of your name incorrectly. I tried pronouncing your full name from the get-go, and it turned out to be a complete disaster, and I completely butchered it with the first 4 or 5 takes I've done of this video so far. So if and when you got the spare time, if you happen to catch this video at some point, please let me know if me just calling you Corvus for the time being offends you or upsets you, and I will do my best to be better about your name. I'm gonna keep working on trying to pronounce your name a lot better, because you know I hate not being able to pronounce words and names properly. So it is something I'm definitely going to do my best to work on in the near future. But yeah, I wish you all the best, and I hope that whatever it is you got going in your life works out for the best. Everything goes well. Take care. Archetypes. Can I just admit and confess for a moment that this is like one of the worst topics that, you know, for me to cover, you know, as like my first true video to sub for, you know, to sub for, you know, someone else. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. You know, I'm not complaining in the least. I just find it hilarious because this video has been a huge challenge for me, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, because challenge is always good. You know, it helps me to strive to speak better, to present better, to share things with others better. You know, to apply my knowledge and my experiences in such a way, you know, to continue to strive for excellency. So it's you know things could have, you know, turned out better, but that's all right. That's perfectly fine. So what exactly is an archetype, or what are archetypes? Well, I have read and have heard it described in many ways, but I think the best way I have ever heard archetypes described in one form or another is as such. Archetypes are a model of beings or people standing in as symbols for collections of attributes or traits. Take that as you will. I always feel that archetypes are their roles. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they're mere occupations, or, you know, they're not just things that you do, be it a job or be it, you know, something that you do well, but it is sort of a role. It's not just something that you do, but you breathe life into it. You make it a part of your own. You add personality to it. You add a spirit of essence and meaning to it that goes beyond mere vocation or classification. Of course, you got your typical archetypes: healer, mother, father, death, gatekeeper, psychopomp, so on and so forth. I know that archetypes is a huge thing in psychology. I got to study psychology just a little bit in high school, and while I never had a chance to take college classes in an actual college or university. I did, however, was able to study psychology a little bit in a sort of unorthodox style of college education. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish what classes I did take for various different reasons. But it was interesting. It was fun. We talked a little bit about archetypes in some of those classes, and honestly, I have a hard time remembering anything that was brought up in those classes. I know that archetypes is a very common thing that you'll find in various forms of paganism, and doubly so in witchcraft, especially modern forms of witchcraft. Honestly, it's something that that up until recently, it's something that I haven't really thought much about, or really added to, or used much, or utilized, or worked with much in my spirituality, be it from the more religious sort of worship side of spirituality, or the ritualistic magical side of spirituality. Take that as you will. In fact, for a long time, I actually went out of my way to sort of stay clear of, utilizing any kind of archetypes in my practice, simply because for a while I was under the very wrong assumption that as far as archetypes went within a pagan practice, it referred more to a type of belief regarding deity. And I come from a very hard polytheist sort of belief in deity ever since from the beginning. My history as far as paganism go, I came into it from a very ethnic, cultural based style of paganism, and while I've almost always practiced some form of Celtic, especially Irish form of paganism, polytheism, from almost since the very beginning, I've also have learned about, experienced a bit of other forms of cultural-based paganism. And so archetypes, at least from a very reflecting upon it, it wasn't something that I consciously dealt with, or interacted with, or thought about, or actively did anything with in my practice. And it's something that I'm kind of very new to, in a way. It's something that I guess in sort of a bit of a weird surprise has sprung up for me, upon me from the shadows, or from out of my sight, out of the corner of my eye, if you will. The main reason that I've interacted with archetypes is rebuilding my relationship with my goddess Brige in the past few years. When I first met Brige years ago, she was very much Brige as the healer. And learning about Brige, she has various different roles, different archetypes, if you will. The healer, the poet, the smith, the judge, Brige of hospitality, Brige of the callous, which is, in retrospect, kind of a weird way of saying, Brige of the homeless, Brige of social justice. There are some personal versions of Brige that I have met that, as far as I'm aware of, those side of Brige aren't named in folklore, or given specific names or titles in folklore, but I've started doing so in my own practice. Brige of the sorrows, Brige of the veiled ones. Both are very specific sides of Brige that I interact with towards the darker side of the year, especially around Samhain, as Brige of the showers is very much deals with her grieving over the loss of her son. Brige of the veiled one for me is very much her going into solitude, into that deep, dark, very winter sort of place. So both are very much aspects of her essence that are focusing on death, of dying, of reflection of wisdom, that sort of wisdom that comes from all those things. And one of the main things that I've learned from interacting with the different sides, the different facets of Breach, is that she's still the same goddess no matter which face I get of her. She still has the same personality. It's just that depending on the role that she takes upon herself that I interact with at any given time, different parts of her personality are emphasized more so than others. For example, I will see a sterner side, a more stern side of her when I'm dealing with her as Breach of the Sorrows or Breach of the Veiled Ones. She is very much compassionate and caring and very sweet and loving when I deal with her as Breach of healing. So just taking that into consideration, and it's just got me to think about archetypes a little bit more so recently in the past couple years, more so than I have ever had in all of the previous years of my practice. And I'm not entirely sure how my practice dealing with in a very conscious, very intentional way of archetypes will shape up in the near future. It is something that I want to look a little bit more into and see how I can incorporate it into my own personal practice and in all its different aspects. But not only dealing with deity, another way that I have recently within the past couple years have ran across archetypes, archetypal work, is in my own practice. Very much as that sort of blind seer, that blind sage sort of archetype, that the one who physically may not be able to see, but has some sort of connection to, some sort of insight to the other side, to the other world, be able to see and know things, to draw upon sacred hidden knowledge to help others. And while it's always kind of been there as a part of my practice, it's something that's only really been that I've only really known about, and it's sort of kind of developed in its own weird way organically, because at least for me, it's I was with various different groups that I would practice with for occasional purposes, for ritual purposes, be it magic or for worship, general worship, and the time for taking up of divination, taking up of omens, for what did those deities, those spirits, those beings that we honored, that we worked with in those rituals, what did they think? How did they react to what we did for them and did with them? And I just found myself sort of just, I guess you could say, just naturally drawn to that role, having that role pretty much thrust upon me, having people look to me in those situations as such. And it's, while it's something that I'm very much aware of, I've never really explored personally, very actively, very consciously, very willingly explored, and is, from what I understand, is something that is very much going to become part of a bit of a working I'm going to be doing more towards the end of this year, probably going in the next couple years as well. But it just got me to thinking that these roles, these very, very powerful, very meaningful, very purposeful roles take on a life of their own, take on a spirit of their own. They almost become their own people, because with each title, with each word that is attached to these models of beings, if you will, a collection of these attributes, they're things that you expect, that you depend upon, that you demand when you find someone or find something of that role, who takes upon that role. It's kind of like a spiritual essential way of You need to do something. You need to write the right job. Protection, healing, cursing, what have you. And taking upon that work, exploring those avenues of life, of ritual, it opens very interesting doors and ways of communicating with these models of attributes, these energies, if you will, these roles, these vocations that have their own, I guess you could say, spirit, if you will. And if it's what I find interesting when I've the few brief periods of time, especially this year, that I've actively looked at it, seeing how certain roles, certain archetypes show up in different cultures, among different people. They might have different names. They might be slightly different from one another, but they're very similar in a lot of ways. And it's just interesting to see of these different people who live, who practice, who take upon these various archetypes upon themselves. You know, how they express themselves and how they express their own version, their own perspective of that archetype that they take upon themselves, or that they work with, or that they call upon, or they utilize. How they differ from very similar archetypes of different names. It's very interesting, and it is very powerful, and it's a very beautiful thing to see in action, in motion. And that's all I really got to say about archetypes. I'm sorry, everybody. Like I said, it's not something that I know too much about. It's not something that I've experienced too much over the years. It's something that's sort of crept up upon me in the past few years. I'd say in the past maybe 4, 5, 6 years, give or take. And I'm still very much figuring out, like I said, very much in a conscious, intentional way of how it applies to me, how it applies to my practice. How do I want to utilize it to make what I do and how I express my practice and how I express my faith in a more excellent direction, in an excellent way. Anyway, thank you for listening to my bit of a ramble for this week. I hope to do better next week when I have a much better setup going on. I have much more time to prepare and hopefully have a topic that I can talk more about, that I have a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more experience about. Anyway, it is always great to share anything that I can with you all. Take care. May Breach bless.